Hey, do you love comics? Then you're probably going to enjoy this podcast, especially if you love Marvel, DC, Star Wars, and Power Rangers just like me. This is the Comic Spoilers Talk podcast where I talk comics, including spoilers. This is episode number 3. Please enjoy. Hey, what's going on, comic book readers? Jacob Bartley here, and welcome back to the Comic Spoilers Talk podcast. And also, welcome if you are a new listener. Thank you for joining me. I'm Jacob Bartley, like I said, and I am a movie podcaster, a movie lover, a superhero lover, and now a comic book podcaster, and a new comic book reader. And I started this comic book YouTube channel just to talk about superheroes. And it's not just comics, it's movies. It's TV shows, it's maybe even video games, but definitely comics, and this podcast is specifically for comics. And warning, I talk spoilers, so let's get into it. What are we going to talk about today? We're going to be talking some Steve Rogers Captain America number 2. We're going to be talking some Captain Marvel number 6. And in the comic book catch-up segment of this podcast, we're going to be talking Mighty Morphin Power Rangers numbers 1 through 3. And Star Wars number 20. Now, my last 2 podcasts has had a format where I do the comic book catch-up first, and then I discuss the newer issues that released this past week later on. And I kind of realized that that's kind of maybe counterproductive, because most people listening to a podcast about comics today, which is not a lot of people, but those who are probably want to hear about the newer comics first, and they want to hear the newest issues when the podcast first starts. So I figured I'm going to move the regular reviews for the newer issues up to the front of the podcast, and I'm going to do comic book catch-up at the end of the podcast. So to start this off, I'm going to be talking Steve Rogers Captain America number 2, and then Captain Marvel number 6. Let's start off with Steve Rogers Captain America number 2. Now, all of you may know that about a month ago, when that first Steve Rogers Captain America number 1 came out, the whole, not even just the comic book world, but the media and fans lost their minds, because there was that infamous Hail Hydra line said by Captain America at the end of the issue, and everyone was speculating, oh my goodness, what's going on? People were sending out death threats, I heard, to Marvel, which is insane. That's not necessary. But anyways, the point being that people lost their minds over this. And of course, with that end of that issue comes speculation. A lot of people were saying there were some time travel elements involved. A lot of people were saying that he was going undercover as a Hydra agent or something like that. Well, we finally get the answer as to what's going on with Cap, and it's very clever in my opinion. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but let's just start with the overall issue. I like this issue a lot. I was okay with the Steve Rogers Captain America number 1. I read it because I was intrigued by the Hail Hydra thing, but I liked it enough to continue reading, and I gotta say that they heavily improved on this issue number 2. And not that the issue number 1 was bad, but it kind of just left you hanging, and this one was satisfying in the sense that you found out what was going on with the Hail Hydra thing with Steve Rogers. Now, first of all, there's not actually a lot of Steve Rogers in this issue. It's mainly the Red Skull and what he's going through and what he's doing, what his plans are, and how he's manipulating things in his favor. And just goes to show the Red Skull is a great character just in general. I've always liked the Red Skull. I think he's one of the better MCU villains in the movies. And unfortunately, we haven't seen him back yet. I hope he comes back. And people always talk about the Marvel villains in the movies as if they're bad, and a lot of them have not been good. There's been Loki. I actually liked Ultron, but other than Loki, would say Red Skull is the second best villain the Marvel Universe has had to this date. So hopefully to see him back. But anyways, in this comic book issue, he's great. His dialogue is amazing. He's such a great speaker, and that has always been the case in comics and cartoons, even in the movie. He's such a great presenter, a great speaker. He knows how to motivate people and just talk, and he can talk smoothly, he can talk aggressively, and they really show that off in this issue with the Red Skull. And you can't help but kind of be intrigued by him, even though you hate him, because he's up to no good and he's always against our favorite Captain America. But there's something charming about him that kind of not makes you root for him, but kind of you like the character a lot. And that's how I feel about the Red Skull. So we find out that the cosmic cube, which gave Steve Rogers his powers back and brought him back to his normal age, has taken the shape of a little girl. And at first it was kind of weird because you see this little girl, she's scared, and she's kind of just sitting there, and Dr. Eric Selvig and then I think Maria Hill see her, and they're like, it looks like she's somewhere else. And for some reason the cosmic cube part of her was in the SHIELD labs, but then she was a physical girl going to see the Red Skull. And through story development we find out that she is able to go into someone's mind and completely erase their memories or add new memories and make them think things happened to them in the past that maybe did not happen. And we find out she did that with Eric Selvig, and she changed his memories and made him believe that he's been a Hydra agent this whole time and he's a scientist working for Hydra. Now that they introduced this story element, and it makes so much sense in the way they explain it, if you read it, it makes complete sense. This is what the Red Skull is having her do to Steve Rogers. He had her go into Steve Rogers' head and make him believe through his memories that he has always been a Hydra agent, and now he's the Red Skull's puppet. And mind blown for me. This is amazing. I think it's so clever, and it gives a great explanation to this. And you can't be mad if you're a fan, because it's not, Steve Rogers isn't really a Hydra agent. The Red Skull is manipulating him and messing with his mind and erasing his memory, and I'm sure he's going to get his memory back eventually, but this is going to be a fun ride going forward, and I'm so excited to be reading this issue. I have to keep reading after this. I'm trying to be good about not reading everything. I go into the comic book store and it's so hard not to buy certain issues, but I have to limit myself. I'm on a budget and I don't have time to read everything, so I have to pick and choose which issues to keep reading. And I believe the Steve Rogers Captain America 2 has made the Steve Rogers Captain America permanent series for me to keep on reading. A few other things, just the girl, they call her Kobik, I believe, and this is just the cosmic cube basically in a being form. She's just awesome. I don't know, she's very powerful. She gets shot at and the bullets do nothing to her, and you can't do anything to her. She's so powerful. The Red Skull, she could destroy the Red Skull if she wanted to, but for some reason he has her under his spell in a way, not literally, but like she's infatuated with him. And it's because when she was in the cosmic cube form that he treated her with so much love and so much dedication, and he nurtured the cube. So I think she looks at him as a father figure in a way. But regardless, she could destroy him. That's the impression I got. The only negative I would say is that Cap is not really in the issue at all. I mean, other than what the Red Skull's doing to him, it's not really a Cap story in this issue. It's kind of, this could be a Red Skull comic. It really could. And I'm okay with that, but it's just, I hope we get more of the perspective from Steve Rogers going forward. And yeah, I totally loved it. It's a total mind F and a total psychological trip, and they got me hooked, and I'm loving it. I'm definitely going to keep reading. Alright, moving on to the only other new issue that I read this week, and that is Captain Marvel number 6. Now, if you haven't been listening to any of my podcasts on this Comic Hero Talk channel, then you might not know that I am obsessed with Captain Marvel right now. I think that she is going to eventually become Marvel's Wonder Woman. She's never going to be as iconic as Wonder Woman. I don't think any female comic book character will. But in the sense that Marvel doesn't have a prominent female lead character like that in the comics. And I believe that Captain Marvel Carol Danvers is going to become that character. So, in that thinking, I went and bought all of her issues in this current run, not all time, just this current run. I bought Captain Marvel's 1 through 5, and I loved it. Amazing. And now I'm on issue number 6, which came out this week, and of course it's tied into the Civil War storyline. So it's called Lonely at the Top Part 1, and from certain events that happen in this, I believe this is set before the events of Civil War II issue number 1. So it's kind of time jumping a little bit, and I wish they would have been more clear about that. It's definitely a negative. They should say at the beginning of the issue, unless I missed it. I might have missed it, but at the beginning of the issue, it should say what timeline we're in, because Civil War II issue number 1 came out over a month ago, and this Captain Marvel number 6 is set before those incidents. And the main thing that made me realize that is that Rhodey is in this issue, and he plays an important role. But obviously, spoilers, this is a spoiler podcast, he's dead through the events of Civil War II issue number 1. So I'm going to get to him a little bit later, not too far away, but pretty soon. But yeah, I love Captain Marvel issue number 1 through 5, and I love all the stuff with her in Civil War II so far. And I'll continue on some of the stuff that I mentioned before that continues in this issue, is that just the Alpha Flight, the whole idea of the Alpha Flight, how they're Earth's first defense, and just the whole environment of that whole space station is awesome. And the team aspect, they have some great characters in there. Like every member of her team has their own personality, and they bring a certain skill set that adds to that team. And I think this is a really cool dynamic that's built just in this team, and I think this will translate very well into a movie. Not that I'm here to talk about the movies, but she does have a movie coming out in 2019, and I think the Alpha Flight is the way to go. And it could be kind of similar to like Star Trek, but we haven't seen a movie where I haven't seen a movie where there's a space station right above Earth that it's the line of first defense, and they could do some really cool things with that cinematically. So I love that dynamic in this comic for sure, and it definitely makes it feel like it could be its own thing outside of the Marvel universe, like a space station, Earth's first defense, with a superpowered female as the head of that. Really cool. Now, moving on to the Rhodey thing, I freaking lost my mind. He walks in during a celebration for her being 6 months the head of Alpha Flight, and I guess they're dating. Holy crap. In Captain Marvel number 1, you see he says bye to her before she goes up to Alpha Flight, and I'm like, there's a little bit of flirtation there, but I don't know if it's just friendly or if there's something romantic going on there. But they come right out with it in this issue that they're dating, they're pretty much boyfriend and girlfriend, but they don't put a label on it. And after he shows up to the party, they only have a few hours, they do their thing in the bed, and that is crazy because he dies. This changes my whole perspective on Civil War II now, because you feel so devastated for Tony, Iron Man, when Rhodey dies. But we don't know at the time that Rhodey is her love. She loves him. It seems like they're in love. They really care about each other. It's her significant other. So Tony not only lost his best friend, but she lost her lover. This is crazy because I don't know if Tony knows that they were together like that. So would he feel more compassion for Captain Marvel if he knew that? Who knows? But this is crazy. I'm so enthralled in this whole Civil War II storyline, and this just made it way more interesting. Another thing that I liked about this Captain Marvel number 6 is the political aspect of it. So she's the leader of the Alpha Flight Station. So she has to be in communications with, like, similar to the United Nations, just a board that is full of leaders from different nations, and they kind of have to communicate with Alpha Flight to see what's going on and regulate things. And there's like a third of the issues takes place with her talking to this board, and it's really cool. Black Panther's a part of it, and a few other characters, and I really liked it. And also, again, just like the Amazing Spider-Man and the X-Men, they tie this into the Civil War II storyline. Ulysses is mentioned, the Inhuman, that the whole conflict is based around, and you understand more so why she is on the side that she's on. And another cool thing was seeing Minerva, I believe. She's the Kree villain who's fought Captain Marvel before, and she gets to fight her again. And while I'm intrigued with the character, I didn't love what that character was doing. She was releasing some type of chemical that was transforming humans or killing humans or something like that, and I'm kind of just I'm bored with that use of a story where, oh, the villain is releasing this chemical that's harming the humans and we got to somehow stop it. Like I don't know, I've seen it a bunch of times and I'd rather not, but hopefully they don't go back to that. But overall, Love this issue. Cannot wait to keep reading Civil War 2 and the next Captain Marvel issue for sure. Alright, moving on to the comic book catch-up segment of the Comic Spoilers Talk podcast. Had a short regular segment this week. I only read 2 new issues, but should have some more next week. There's a lot of stuff coming out next week, so look forward to some new issues next week. But for now, we're moving on to the comic book catch-up, and I'm going to go ahead and start with Star Wars number 20, and then I got 3 Power Rangers comics to review after this. But let's talk about Star Wars number 20. Holy crap. Alright, so I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and it's probably, no, it definitely is my number 1 geek love. My first love is Star Wars. It goes Star Wars, and then probably a 3-way tie with X-Men, Spider-Man, and Power Rangers, but Star Wars is number 1. And within the Star Wars universe, Obi-Wan Kenobi is my favorite character. Alec Guinness and Ewan McGregor. I love them both. Just the character as a whole. I love him in the movies, both portrayals. I love him in Clone Wars. Haven't finished it. I'm going to finish it, and I'm going to review each season of Clone Wars on this YouTube channel, so look forward to that. And also, just his little cameos in Rebels and stuff like that. So, a little bit of backstory on my love for Star Wars and Obi-Wan. Now, this Star Wars issue number 20 is all about Obi-Wan Kenobi. So, it's from a set of journals that Luke has from Ben Kenobi, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and it's an excerpt from that journal. And it's basically when Obi-Wan was on Tatooine watching over Luke, and it's just one little story from that time period. And I believe, just to give some perspective on what time period it is, I believe Luke, he looks around 12 to 15 years old. So 5, 6, 7, 8 years before A New Hope. That's what it looks like this is set in. Now that you got some setup, holy crap. This is, out of the 6 comics that I read for this podcast, this is my favorite by far. Not only because I'm a Star Wars fan, not only because Obi-Wan Kenobi is my favorite Star Wars character, but it's just great. It really is. Being unbiased, it's great. So, you got this Wookiee named Black Chrysanthemum. Don't know how to pronounce that. He's hunting Obi-Wan. Jabba the Hutt sent him after him, and for the first part of the issue, you don't really see Obi-Wan. You get Black Chrysanthemum, and then you get young Luke. You get Uncle Owen with Aunt Beru, and they're looking for Luke, and he's planning on running away, and then he hears some yelling going on back at home, and he runs back home, and Uncle Owen's missing. And you see Aunt Beru. You know Aunt Beru, the old lady in A New Hope? She has a freaking blaster, which is awesome. I never pictured Aunt Beru as a badass, but apparently she is. So that was pretty cool to see. And she looks a lot younger and a lot more attractive in this comic, which is hard to think. This is only 7 or 8 years before that. Weird, but anyways. So Black Chrysanthemum, that's how I'm going to pronounce it right now. It's definitely wrong. Has taken Uncle Owen, and who shows up to save Uncle Owen? Dun dun dun! Obi-Wan Kenobi. And the first time you see him, he just looks so awesome. I was like, hey! Because you see him in the Jedi robe, and he looks like Ewan McGregor, but a lot older than he was in Revenge of the Sith. And it's kind of the in-between of the Ewan McGregor and Alec Guinness. And they reference that he's getting older. He climbed up a hill and was struggling even with that. So you know he's not in his best fighting shape. Especially he hasn't been fighting as much lately. And he hasn't been in touch with the Force as he has been in the past. So he's not at his best. But he has to save Uncle Owen because his primary objective is to keep Luke safe. And Uncle Owen is the person who looks after Luke. So, and even if Uncle Owen was just a random person, Obi-Wan Kenobi would save him. So that's awesome. So he takes on this Wookiee, and he has a lot of trouble at first, but eventually he obviously defeats the Wookiee and saves, or we'll get to the saving Uncle Owen part, but he gets Uncle Owen away from the Wookiee. He defeats the Wookiee, and as Uncle Owen gets thrown off a cliff, and I freaking geeked out so hard in this moment. Obi-Wan said, "Guide my hand, Master Qui-Gon." Holy crap. I was reading this at work, and I jumped out of my chair, literally, and was jumping up and down with excitement when he said, "Guide my hand, Master Qui-Gon." So, pause for a moment. There's rumors going around that they might make a Obi-Wan Kenobi trilogy, or at least a movie, in the Star Wars anthology films or the Star Wars story films, just like they're making Rogue One, just like they're making Han Solo. I'm hoping, and it's most likely, that they're doing an Obi-Wan movie next, bringing Ewan McGregor back. I think one thing that you can introduce is a Qui-Gon Jinn Force Ghost, and bring Liam Neeson back. My childhood right there, boom. I love it. So I really geeked out on this moment. It was so amazing. And unfortunately, while he's fighting the Wookiee, Obi-Wan cannot prevent Uncle Owen from falling. And who comes to save Uncle Owen is Luke Skywalker in a dang skyhopper. So at the beginning earlier, they set it up where Uncle Owen was trying to find Luke so they could fix this skyhopper, and as Aunt Beru goes looking for Uncle Owen, Luke stays behind and fixes the skyhopper and saves Uncle Owen, flies in and saves him. And it's just really cool. It really reminds me of young Anakin. When you see Luke in this skyhopper, it totally brought me back to episode 1 and the good things, the good innocent young kid who's, very savvy with technology and fixing stuff, and also a great pilot. And it sets up Luke for the future, because you kind of wonder, they say he's a great pilot in A New Hope, but you kind of want to see it, and they show it in this. But one other thing that's very important is that Uncle Owen sees Obi-Wan use his Jedi powers, and he knows Obi-Wan's a Jedi now. This completely changes episode 4, when Luke is asking Uncle Owen about Ben Kenobi, the crazy old hermit, old man down the street. At this point, Uncle Owen knows that Obi-Wan Kenobi is a Jedi, or that Ben Kenobi is Obi-Wan Kenobi, the Jedi, and it changes everything. That's why reading these comic books and following with the canon, whether it's the novels, the TV shows, or the comics, it gives you so much more perspective on everything in the Star Wars universe, because one little thing like this changes my viewing of A New Hope, because now I know that Uncle Owen knows that. So it's really cool, and I'm so glad I read. I almost didn't read this comic. I'm so glad I did. So yeah, that overall, my favorite comic of the week. I freaking loved it so much. Alright, moving from one thing that I love to something I love almost equally, and that is Power Rangers. So, last week I reviewed Mighty Morphin Power Rangers number 0, and I've had all 5 issues waiting to read. I just, I had to get time to read them, but now I've been reading them. This past week I read 3 in a row, and first of all, I love Power Rangers. I watched it so much as a kid. My first movie-going memory is going to see Mighty Morphin Power Rangers in the theaters, the first movie, which I still think is not a bad movie. Power Rangers Turbo, horrible. And even the show, I know the show is not, it's cheesy. I know that. I know the show's cheesy. It's my ultimate guilty pleasure. I love it. So anyways, I don't need to go into a full depth explanation as to why I love Power Rangers. I also am going to review the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers seasons 1 through 3. I'm not going to review anything past Mighty Morphin, just the Mighty Morphin, and there's 3 seasons, but lucky for me, there's 60 episodes in season 1, so look forward to that on my channel as well. But anyways, I'm here to talk comics, so let's start with Mighty Morphin Power Rangers number 1. And like I said with the number 0, I love this because it's a modern take on the Power Rangers. It keeps everything from the show, like the looks and the characters, the look of the characters and all the villains, and everyone looks the same, but it's in modern day, and it's not cheesy as hell like the show. And you got to remember, the show came out in the 90s, so what worked then wouldn't work now. So when you're watching it with today's mindset, obviously it's cheesy, but back then it probably worked, and it obviously did for thousands and hundreds and millions of kids, so just like myself. Anyways, this whole storyline, and I don't know if it's a negative for me or not, but it's all set around Tommy, Tommy Oliver, the Green Ranger, and it's after him being brainwashed by Rita and going up against the Power Rangers. We don't see that, but it's right after that, and that might be one of my biggest negative is that it focuses too much on Tommy, and it takes away from the other aspects of what you could be doing with the Power Rangers. But other than that, I thoroughly enjoy these comic books. Especially, I really like this number 1, and it's really cool because going back to the modern day thing, you see Bulk and Skull, and they kind of have their own type of YouTube channel where they cover the Rangers and like, oh, what's going on with the Rangers this week? Come back and check out our show. Like, it's really cool because that's the type of thing that would be going on in modern day. And I like it because in the show, Bulk and Skull are just bullies and they're constantly picking on the Power Rangers, and they're not good characters even in the show. In the comics, they're not really bullies. They're kind of just, they're kind of just outsiders, and they look up to the Power Rangers. They want to be like the Power Rangers. So it's a little different take on Bulk and Skull, which I like. But also, what this comic does is it sticks true to the Power Rangers in a lot of ways. It has Jason as the leader, and you see him really taking responsibility and being there for the other Power Rangers, like asking Zach what's wrong and backing him up when the teachers pick on him. And then also, even though he's questionable about Tommy, he accepts Tommy and believes that they need to be there to help him. So really cool that they stick true to Jason's personality and him being the leader overall. And also, one thing they get into this issue is Kim, the Pink Ranger, trying to like flirt with Tommy. And for some reason, and this might be the case, but I won't know yet, but for some reason when I was a kid, I could have sworn that Jason and Kimberly had a romantic thing going on. Now I'm rewatching Power Rangers, the series, right now, and there hasn't really been anything flirtatious or anything between Jason and Kimberly. And I know that the Green Ranger, Tommy, shows up in episode 17, and I'm on like episode 12. So maybe there was never a romance between Jason and Kimberly. I always thought there was, and I always thought it was weird that Kimberly went to Tommy after her and Jason had a thing, but maybe they never did. But also, there is kind of some little flirtation from my perspective with Jason and Kimberly in this comic book series, but I think it was more in number 2. But Kim definitely likes Tommy. She's asking him out to coffee and stuff, and you could tell, and she gets disappointed when he can't make it. One other cool thing that I liked about this is at the headquarters, at Zordon's headquarters, Power Rangers fan, I can't even remember the name of it. It has a specific name, but they have these training sequences where they kind of go into like a virtual reality, and they're doing like missions, but they're being trained, and it really reminded me of the X-Men's Danger Room, which is freaking awesome. So I really loved that. And this comic's really all about, just like all the issues, is Tommy's struggle and how he's dealing with coming off of Rita's manipulation, and they really kind of make him the main character, but there's some really cool things going on with the Power Rangers outside of that. So this issue I really liked. It's not as good as number 0. I really liked the 0 issue, but I really liked the number 1 as well, but just not as much. Alright, now let's go on to Mighty Morphin Power Rangers number 2. It's gonna kind of be a lot of the same stuff, like where I'm not sure if I like how much you're focusing on Tommy, but I do like issues 2 and 3 a lot more than number 1. So let's get into it. And issue number 2, it opens up with Trini, the Yellow Ranger, and Billy, the Blue Ranger, inside of the Dragon Zord. Because there was an issue, something that happened, I believe it was in the 0 issue, where they were in the Zords, the Power Rangers were in their Megazord, and then Tommy was in the Dragon Zord, and Tommy lost control of the Dragon Zord and caused some destruction. So Billy and Trini are inside of it trying to figure out what's wrong with it, and they kind of get into some scientific explanations as to how the Zords work, and I think that's really cool because they never touch on it in depth in the show. And then as they're talking, it kind of pans out, and you see that they keep the Zords underwater, which is so awesome. Because in the show, they just pop up out of nowhere. They pop out at random spots, but it would make sense for them to be kept underwater. Especially in the Bay Area, where Angel Grove is supposedly located, I think. So, yeah, I really like this issue. And especially because there's a lot of character dynamic between Billy and Trini. They have a whole conversation while they're in the Dragon Zord, and Billy kind of talks about how he's self-conscious because he's not a fighter, but Trini lets him know that you do a lot of stuff that none of us could do, like the science stuff. So really cool that they're taking time to develop these characters and touch on certain aspects of what's going on with them personally. I really appreciate that as a Power Rangers fan, because they're treating this material seriously, and that's all I want. I want this material to be treated seriously. I think the mythology is so cool and you could do a lot with it, and I'm hoping and praying that the movie is going to be awesome and they do the same thing. So yeah, I really did like number 2 a lot more than number 1. We get this villain named Scorpina. Stupid name, but she's a pretty cool villain. She looks really cool, and seems like a really trained, seriously taken warrior. And I don't think she was ever on the show. Maybe later on. I haven't met her yet, but yeah, it was really I think that character is really cool, and she's kind of Rita's hitman in a way. She's like her greatest warrior that she sends after anyone. So yeah, that's pretty much everything from issue number 2. Again, really liked it a lot more than number 1, and I think I liked number 3 just as much as number 2, and it just continues with the Tommy story. Don't get me wrong, the Green Ranger is awesome, and I love Tommy, but he's kind of just mopey this whole time because he's dealing with that, and he's being a douche to everyone, and everyone's trying to figure out and help him, trying to figure out what's wrong with him, and he's not letting anyone help him. But I still am very involved in this, and I really love it, and I'm going to continue to read this. But I hope they don't drag on with the Tommy thing for too long. I hope it gets resolved in the next couple issues, so we can move on and focus on other stories involving the Power Rangers. But just like number 2, there's some great one-on-one moments, especially between Trini and Tommy. She talks to him about what's going on with him in his mind, and they kind of have some comedic moments back and forth, and I think those moments are what ground this material and can make it be taken seriously with all the action and everything else added to it. And there's one thing that was just really cool about this is Zach was really pressing hard on whether or not they could trust Tommy in this issue, and I think it's viable because who knows? They barely know the guy, and that's what Zach says. We barely know this guy. He shows up out of nowhere. He could still be under Rita's manipulation, and it's really cool that someone's stepping up and really questioning it. Another really cool thing that I really appreciated was they dive into little scientific explanations as to how their powers work. Now, I guess it's not science. It's kind of like magic or sci-fi. I don't know, but whatever it is, they're explaining it slowly. You get bits and pieces in each issue, how their powers work, how their suits work, how the teleportation works, and how the Zords work, and I love it. And overall, with these 1 through 3 issues, the coolest thing is that they stay true and keep the cool stuff from the show, like the morphing and the Zords and the costumes and the sci-fi element and the little bit of that space opera fantasy side, and you keep all those core elements and add some new flavor to it, bring it to modern day, make it cool, and I think you can really turn around the perception of Power Rangers, which I'm hoping that movie does, that comes out next year. I'll be really looking forward to it. Alright, well, that's gonna wrap up comic spoilers talk for this week. Thank you everyone for listening. Again, I am Jacob Bartley. You can find me on Twitter at JacobBartley_. You can find me on my movie YouTube channel, Apocalypse Movies, where I review movies, and we have several movie podcasts. We have an all Star Wars podcast called the Padawan Podcast. You should go check that out. And please, if you enjoy listening to this podcast, any element of it, please subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate it. I'm trying to build this up. I'm trying to build a superhero community, especially among the things that I love, like Marvel and DC and Star Wars and Power Rangers. Those are the 4 things I'm going to focus on the most, but I might dive into some other stuff too. I'm seriously considering watching Preacher and reviewing those episodes. Maybe. Anyways, thank you all for listening. Until next time, take care.